A myth is a story of pure imagination, but legends, specifically urban legends, are something more. They can be cautionary tales about real dangers in modern life, or amusing fables that we wish were true. Urban legends have a colorful and notorious history. I'm Natasha Henstridge. In the next hour, we're going to explore which of these stories are imaginary and which are mostly true. A lot of urban legends feature people who experience a close brush with disaster. And in this case, the danger turns out to be a little too close for comfort.
Our story begins late one night as a couple emerges from a nightclub, headed home. As they approach their car, they see a bunch of kids drinking and lounging around it. A little miffed that they've parked themselves on his car, the husband decides to confront them.
It's not my car, all right?
He orders them to back off immediately. The kids, a bit surprised and a little drunk, are slow to react, and this gets the man's hackles up. The kid's attitude infuriates him, and he shoves one of them aside, then slaps the beer from his hand.
You want some?
Suddenly, the mood gets ugly.
What's your problem, man?
Don't take that.
His wife begs him not to make a big deal out of the situation. The kids become angry and rally around their friends.
Let's be cool, all right?
They begin to taunt our irate husband,
Deb, come on!
while his wife pleads with him to get in the car.
Be cool, all right?
Sensing he's overstepped his bounds, the husband retreats to the driver's seat. But now it's the kids who get tough, and they surround the car, jeering.
Come back out! Get out!
They pound on it, chanting loudly and threatening violence, or at least that's the way our couple sees it. Revved up, the kids shake up the vehicle. One of them even grabs the bumper and starts to bounce the car. Now terrified, the husband throws the car into gear, hits the gas, and peels off, leaving behind the gang of angry kids. Later, as they roll up to their driveway, the couple has recovered after what they feel was a close call.
What?
Oh, you know what? You should never have started with those kids.
Look, let's just check for damage, all right?
And the wife isn't happy with her hot-headed spouse. Then, when they check the car out for any damage, the woman gasps in horror. Wedged into the rear bumper are 3 bloody human fingers, torn off the hand of one of the kids as the car sped away. The husband is shocked by the grisly souvenir of their encounter, and his wife is appalled at him for causing such a terrible accident. Left with the sting of guilt, he's now haunted by the vision of a young kid who's lost half his hand. The legend is a grabber, but is it true? This gruesome account has been told and retold, primarily throughout the English-speaking world, and printed accounts of it first appeared around 1960. But other versions go back to long before this. One of the earliest was in a 1579 book entitled La Nouvelle.
There is a legend of a man who's riding along on his horse who is accosted by a highwayman who grabs the bridle of the horse. And when he gets home, he finds the hand of the assailant still holding the bridle.
Of course, today, the automobile has replaced the horse as the vehicle that yanks off the disenfranchised digits. Specifically, cars with an old-fashioned chrome bumper. And there are several interpretations of what it all means. On the one hand, so to speak, the story deals with paranoia. It's a condemnation of timid suburbanites who equate all strangers, or all city youth, with criminals. Hence, they overreact to a situation that isn't all that dangerous. The other interpretation is the idea that a couple of innocent people are terrorized by thugs who get their just desserts. This view is by far the more common, and it exploits both strong emotions and vivid images.
This is a story of retribution, but I think that the most powerful image in this story is the one that keeps it going, and that is the issue of the severed fingers. Severed fingers not only figure in folklore going back for a long, long time, but severed fingers are very, very big in urban legends, starting with the choking Doberman.
In this legend, when a choking dog is taken to the vet, they discover the animal has several fingers caught in its throat.
What is it? Oh my God.
There's another one. There's another one.
Fingers that belong to a burglar who is still in the house. In many of these legends, it's criminals who pay the painful price. And one reason it may have originated in the 1960s is that this was the era in which inner-city gangs came to national prominence. Since gangs and exaggerated fears about inner-city youth are still with us, so is the legend.
It probably heightens our fears, makes us more suspicious of strangers and dealing with strange territories, strange neighborhoods, and perhaps strange groups. So it may exacerbate fears that people have of the unknown.
But the main reason it endures is because it paints an appalling picture.
A good legend often has a graphic image involved. The severance of fingers is fairly graphic. The gruesomeness of the mutilation is one of the emotions that this legend traffics in.
And in fact, the legend has credibility because of urban gangs like the Yakuza Underground, a mafia-like cult in Japan that began centuries ago as roving bands of warriors.
The Yakuza are most saliently identified by having the first joint of their pinky finger on their left hand missing. It's gone. The symbolism of removing the finger is that you can't get it back. So it's a permanent mark that you have paid with a piece of your body part this debt.
Of course, the pruned pinkies of the Yakuzas are intentional. The legend, by contrast, says the fingers are torn off by accident. Restoring missing fingers is now a well-established procedure. So if the legend is for real, there should be many documented cases of restoration surgery. Like this one, which was performed for a young child who was born with 3 missing fingers. In this case, the absent appendages can be replaced by borrowing from one part of the body for use on another.
The most commonly reconstructive method is to take their toes and transplant them from the foot to the hand.
Since nerve fibers can't be reconnected, the toes have to be anchored to working muscles in the hand that will allow the new digits to be manipulated. A procedure like this can work because the tissues haven't been badly damaged. But could this technique work on a hand where the fingers were violently torn off?
Typically, amputations due to car accidents, motor vehicle accidents, motorcycles have a serious crush component to them, and the tissue is often very traumatized, and reattachment of those parts following car accidents and that kind of thing is very difficult and sometimes impossible.
So what does the doctor say about the urban legend?
In my opinion, I think this is really not a possible event. I think they'd end up being dragged before that digit was actually pulled off. So I think in that scenario of holding onto a bumper and a car fleeing really is not a feasible mechanism to pull a finger off.
And in fact, there is no such report of this event ever happening. Still, the legend endures because, fair or not, it delivers a popular message.
There's nothing inherently unbelievable in the legend. It suggests that the world is a dangerous place, the urban world is a dangerous place.
In this story, the shock comes from a violent injury, but in our next legend, it comes from a tragic death. True or false? A golfer in Palm Beach, Florida was eaten by a crocodile right on the golf course. The answer, when we return. Was a golfer in Palm Beach, Florida eaten by a crocodile right on the course? False. The account is an internet hoax.
A lot of urban legends are so familiar, we simply believe them to be the way things are. But is our next story a reflection of reality, or just wishful thinking?
This story begins with a college student having a very bad day.
Such a loser. You lost your job.
His girlfriend is dumping him, and she tops off her rejection with a diatribe about how his grades stink, how he's lost a part-time job,
I went out with you for as long as I did.
and how he's just plain no fun.
A whole year on you. What's this?
She returns all the CDs and other stuff he had lying around her place and storms out.
Bye.
Call me.
Catching the tail end of this hurricane are the students' two roommates, a couple of hardcore party boys.
I don't have time for this, guys.
They're the last people he needs to see right now, because it's finals week, and our student is chronically behind in his studies. But these two clowns aren't interested in books.
Just study. Why study, stupid? You're only gonna flunk anyway.
Neither one is exactly a scholar. They're headed out to hoist a few, and they harangue their nebbish roommate to come out and join them. But our struggling student is in no mood. He's got a ton of work. His obnoxious roomies won't let up. They jibe and harass him, making fun of his dilemma.
You might as well go get drunk. Forget about your pathetic life.
Until he reaches the breaking point.
Come on, dude, quit nerding out. Let's go party.
Get out of my face! Whoa!
He stands up to them, demanding to be left alone. His life's a disaster, and they're just making it worse. But he gets no sympathy. The dimwit duo rags him about what a lame-o he is, and that if he can't handle life on campus, maybe he should just hang it up. One last taunt, and our party animals saunter out of the room, leaving our morose matriculator in a major funk. In a pit of despair, he finds one of his roommate's hidden bottles and decides to drown his miseries in the loneliness of his room. To hell with the others. To hell with everybody. Nobody cares. Why should he? Hours later, the swaggering roommates stumble back to the room, half in the bag and ready for another round of roommate kickball. But, to their horror, they find their beleaguered bunkmate took their advice after all and decided to hang it up. A few days later, the two students wait in the dean's office.
Dude, my dad is gonna kill me.
Traumatized by their roommate's suicide and all the police and press that followed, they completely failed their exams.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
As a result, they'll have to repeat the semester. But when the dean enters, he comes in with some good news.
In fact, it's school policy.
It seems there's a campus rule, which says that if a student commits suicide during the school year, his surviving roommates are automatically awarded an A for the semester to compensate for the shock of the death. It turns out that our two party animals will complete the semester after all. But do some colleges actually give an automatic A to students whose roommates have tragically died?
Dude, go call somebody or something.
Or does this story flunk the credibility test?
The story reveals how stressful campus life can be, achieving high grades, living by yourself because it's a dormitory situation, and that's very stressful for a student who's not been away from home before. So it does reveal that students are placed in a stressful situation when they are away at school.
The legend has been around for a very long period of time, and I really don't know how it got started. If a student did have a death of a roommate, we would certainly work with that student to help them through the semester.
First, allow me to offer my condolences on the loss of your friend.
This supportive attitude makes the legend ring true.
But I want you to know that the school is here for you.
But on almost every college campus, you can find a student who will tell you they know of someone at another college who got straight A's because their roommate killed himself.
Yeah, I've heard of that one.
Yes, heard of that too. We're roommates, so maybe if I died tomorrow.
How about you, Dad?
You have a great
Yeah.
GPA. Okay.
I would get straight A's, right? Yeah.
All right.
I believe it.
Maybe.
Last semester, actually, there was a shooting in the dorms, and they never knew what it was about, but it might have been because of the straight A thing. I heard the roommate might have just been doing bad in school, really need that new grade.
But the legend doesn't award students who commit murder. The death has to be from suicide or accident. The legend came to prominence in the 1970s, on the heels of the age of Aquarius, a decade in which the idea of toughing it out through adversity was replaced by the more touchy-feely attitude that every trauma in life required some form of healing and compensation.
And/or feelings.
And I wish I had gotten to say goodbye.
Right.
So it only made sense that an innocent student not suffer because of a troubled roommate.
Dude, go call somebody or something.
And the legend has resonance because suicide is a reality on today's competitive campuses.
I think that most of the students who commit suicide are locked into some expectations of their own. You know, I need to have all A's in order to be successful. If I don't get into medical school, I won't be happy, or I can't face my parents. So I think a lot of those pressures that people internalize and believe lead to the loss of hope and then lead to suicide.
But the suicide rule could also be used as an excuse for poor performance, one that outclasses "the dog ate my homework."
If you can think of it, a roommate suicide is probably the most dramatic example of a death of someone close to you. Geez, I was lying in bed and my roommate killed himself, you know, and if you need a reason to miss an exam, that might be a good one.
Some excuses are so popular, they even have nicknames.
I think it's tied to the grandmother death phenomena, that grandmothers tend to die in direct proportion to the closeness to exams.
Which raises another question.
If you're living at home, what if one of your family commits suicide? Does that apply to you too, you know? So like, I don't know, like if one of my relatives were to commit suicide, would I get straight A's?
According to some versions of the legend, it does. And the compensations vary from straight A's to a 3.5 grade point to a stingy 3.0. But are any of these versions true?
No, it's not true. They might even get incompletes for the work they do during the semester if it was a very traumatic experience. But they still have to earn their grades. They're not given as gifts.
When you put it to the test, this legend doesn't make the grade. In this story, a student's anguish is real. But in our next legend, an executive is a complete phony. True or false? The direction of the stock market is predicted by whether the Super Bowl champion is from the NFC or AFC. The answer, when we return. Is the stock market foreshadowed by whether the NFC or AFC wins the Super Bowl? True. For 29 of the first 36 games, an NFC winner means a bull market, an AFC champion means a downturn.
Everybody wants to be a part of the in crowd, to feed their egos, to wow their friends, or to impress their boss. But sometimes climbing the social ladder can bring out the worst instead of the best.
The story begins with a nervous young executive with a very hot date. Maybe a bit out of his league.
Hi, reservation for Siegel?
Maybe way out of his league.
We're a little busy right now. It'll be a couple minutes.
But he's determined to impress her. He slips some cash to the hostess, but it makes no impression. His efforts to come off as a big shot always seem to backfire.
Oh, hi! Come on in. We have a seat for you right away.
Despite the restaurant being almost empty, he's passed over by the hostess. It's a long wait before they're finally led to their table. Our executive's date grows more impatient, and the executive himself more nervous. Once they're finally seated, he starts in with some small talk to warm things up. But his date seems easily distracted and not much interested in making a connection. Our gentleman pours on the charm, chatting about wine, travel, and anything pretentious enough to make him come off as a man of the world. But his words fall flat on the ears of his high-maintenance companion. No matter what he does or how hard he tries, his attempts to wow her are met with a cool apathy. Then, the ultimate insult. Her cell phone rings and she answers it.
Hello?
Suddenly, our desperate charmer is cut out of the loop. It's then that our hero notices something across the room. A top recording star has just been seated, along with his entourage. And our floundering Romeo hits upon an idea. He excuses himself from the table for a moment. Not that his date pays much attention. Summoning up all his courage, he ventures across the room to where the celebrity is sitting. It feels like the longest walk of his life.
Excuse me, sorry to bother you, Big Sin.
Trying not to fumble his words, he politely introduces himself. The artist immediately assumes he wants an autograph. But our executive asks him for something else entirely.
You see that?
He explains that he's trying to impress his date and asks the star if he would drop by his table and say hello, as if they were friends.
Maybe I could look a little cooler.
The musician understands entirely and agrees to do him this favor. Back at the table, our romancer has a new glow of confidence, and he draws his date's attention to the celebrity across the room. Finally, he gets a rise out of her. It turns out she's an absolute fan. Then, the coup de grace. He signals to the star, who gets up and heads for their table. She can't believe it. He's actually coming over. When the artist arrives, he gallantly greets the now blushing young lady. But when he turns to our young executive, our hero gives him the snub.
I'm sitting here, I'm trying to have a nice bottle of wine with my date, and you.
It's an awkward moment, and the celebrity is thrown by his rudeness.
Where did you wear up the hood? Come on.
Offended, the star backs off and quietly leaves. As for the trophy date, she's mightily impressed by our hero's snub of a major celebrity. And she's now in the palm of his hands. Mission accomplished. But is the story true? Did an executive score big with his date by setting up a celebrity for a snub? Or is something about this story just phony? The tale has a certain appeal to the inferiority complex in all of us.
It's the revenge of the ordinary person. We all may not have been snubbed by a real celebrity, but we've all had the experience of being looked down upon, not being received, being rejected. And that's what gives this story appeal. It gives us a chance to be victorious for just a moment.
The legend's origins are not known because celebrity worship is an age-old phenomenon.
I think throughout history, we as humans have had the need to put people or things on pedestals. We see them, in fact, brushed up and perfect, and it gives us that sort of security or illusion that that sort of thing actually exists. I think that the proximity to fame may be alluring to some people for the same reason that some people would feel allured by a proximity to an idol or a god. It gives them a sense that that perfection that they've imposed on the other is rubbing off on them. They are somehow basking in it and protected by it, perhaps.
Everybody sees Tom Cruise or Leonardo DiCaprio or somebody at the pinnacle of their careers, but they never got to see that person at a larval stage with that humanity behind the facade. It's just a role. You create a perception of reality, which you use to entertain people.
To test just how powerful this perception of reality can be, we invited a lovely but little-known actress to play movie star for us. And we took her to the place where the elite hit the streets, the Walk of Fame on Hollywood Boulevard. We surrounded her with the trappings of celebrity. Some beefy bodyguards, limousine, and a camera crew. With such a grand entrance, our starlet makes an immediate impression on the crowd of friendly tourists. Even if they're not sure who she is, she's gotta be somebody. And so, she gets autograph requests, photo ops for the folks back home, and even some fashion advice.
But the shoes with your dress is
I
do it.
So fame is an intoxicant. But the legend isn't just about the date's love of celebrity. It's also about the executive rejecting fame to elevate his own status.
He has a certain amount of gall. There's an element of hostility in a way. You could imagine the guy perhaps feeling somehow less of a person next to the celebrity and wanting to regain some sense of worth by diminishing his.
In some versions of the legend, the strategy backfires, and the girl is put off by her date's rudeness instead of being impressed.
That's the rudest thing I've ever seen.
It's a fine line to walk. Suck up to fame too much, and you look like a servant. Come off as too cavalier, and you're permanently cut off from the A-list. So what does this say about celebrities and the likelihood that they'd be insulted or snubbed?
People come up to me and say, you were really good at Ghostbusters. You know, Groundhog's Day. No, it was Groundhog's Day. And I go, you mean Stripes? Yeah, in Stripes. And Meatballs? Yeah, you were really good. I get that. I get Bill Murray all the time.
I've seen tons of celebrities get snubbed with photographers and fans and stuff. If you see a guy having dinner, let him have his dinner. He deserves that. It's his private life.
So is this tale of the celebrity snub true or false? Well, it depends on who you talk to.
I've heard about stuff like that, but I've never seen one.
Yet, according to Don Rickles' publicist, the famous comedian actually did pull this gag on Frank Sinatra, but only as a joke. Still, a Hollywood legend was born.
I've been using the Don Rickles Frank Sinatra story as my own, as so many actors do in Hollywood. It's a famous story. I remember the first time I heard it, I think Don was telling it on the Tom Snyder show. And I just thought it was a great Hollywood moment, you know, a great story. And Don, you know it's authentic, you know it's true.
Of course, if Frank, or any other celebrity, really were treated this way, the star would inevitably expose the ruse and quickly deflate the snubber. Bottom line, offending the famous is not the way to a girl's heart. In this story, a man's luck changes when he insults a celebrity. But in our next legend, a change of luck comes totally by surprise. True or false? A speeder who was mailed a ticket after being caught by a radar camera sent the police a photograph of money. The answer, when we return. Did a speeder caught by a radar camera pay his ticket by mailing a photo of money? True. In 1991, Steve Barkley mailed a picture of $45 to the police. The police sent back a photo of handcuffs.
Some people are just plain lucky. Others have to create their own luck. But in this urban legend, luck has been lurking in a dark, quiet place for hundreds of years.
This urban legend begins with a national institution, the garage sale, the flea market. Every weekend, millions of Americans slap price tags on their old junk and display it in their front yards, hoping to turn trash into cash. Meanwhile, millions of other Americans peruse these piles of clutter in search of offbeat treasures. And in the case of one bargain hunter, a financial analyst, some of this stuff makes him wonder what else these people have in their attics. Like maybe their grandmother. But on this day, one of the items on sale catches his eye. It's a painting that can be best described as hotel wallpaper. Actually, he doesn't want the painting, he wants the frame, and he forks over a total of $4 to buy it. Back home, he starts to remove the painting from its mounting to check out the frame. And he's floored by what he sees. Not believing his eyes, he backs away from it and calls his neighbor.
Hey, Jared? Listen, man, you gotta come over and see this.
What's up?
I don't know, just come right away, because this is amazing.
Minutes later, the neighbor arrives, and he's as jaw-dropped as his buddy. Neither one of them can believe it's for real.
It's incredible.
So the neighbor suggests they call an expert. Later, in a dark room elsewhere in the city, authoritative eyes scrutinize the find to determine if what they're seeing is for real. What he's got is so astounding, he's even called in a colleague for a second opinion. And the colleague is equally impressed.
It is the real thing.
When our bargain hunter is told the news, he jumps for joy, unable to contain himself over the fact that his entire life is about to change. Later, at an auction, the item he discovered sells for over $2 million. Because what he found hidden behind the painting is an original copy of the Declaration of Independence. A legend with a happy ending. But is this just a flea market fairy tale, or is the truth of this story self-evident? People have been selling this legend since 1989. And small wonder, with the all-American dream of finding a fortune in your attic, it's a story that fuels the flea market phenomenon.
This is a story that appeals to us because an ordinary person managed to strike it rich with very little investment by accident.
But while there are plenty of buried treasures in the world, the original Declaration was a handwritten document, now safely stored in the National Archives in Washington, D.C. And since there were no photocopiers in colonial America, how could other copies exist for anyone to find? After American independence was declared on July 2, 1776, John Hancock signed the Declaration on July 4th. Most of the others didn't sign it until a month later. But to get the word out right away, 500 official copies of it were printed up by John Dunlap and distributed to the 13 new states. Only 24 are known to exist today. The question is, was one of them found behind a $4 painting at a flea market? This is where the job of appraisers and document authenticators comes in. It's up to these experts to separate clever forgeries from actual antiques.
When we're appraising documents, we look at the date, we look at the parchment or paper, we try and see if the signatures are authentic. There's experts in our field that we go to that examine signatures letter by letter with other signatures on file.
So, with all this expertise separating the knockoffs from the genuine article, what are the chances of the Declaration discovery being true?
It is extremely rare, but it happens.
It happened to this woman, Terry Horton, a truck driver who decided to buy a bargain basement painting for a friend.
I told the proprietor I wanted it for this friend as a joke and asked her how much she wanted for it, and she said $8. And I said, I like her, but I don't like her that much. And she said, well, how about $5? And I said, okay, I'll take it.
But when she took it to her friend's trailer, it wouldn't fit through the door. So she put it in storage and went on with her life. Then, a year later, she decided to give it to another friend who was an art professor.
And when he came over and he pulled the covering off of it, he said, oh my God, and I thought he'd seen a spider or something, you know.
What he saw was this Jackson Pollock, complete with the artist's fingerprint on the back.
It was absolutely mind-boggling. For days, I didn't talk to anybody because I didn't know what to say.
And the value of her discount discovery?
It's estimated somewhere between 20, 25 million.
So, flea market fantasies can come true, but what does this say about the ultimate collectible? Is the $4 declaration the real deal? In fact, it is. In 1989, Donald Shear, a financial analyst from Atlanta, Georgia, found an original print of the Declaration of Independence behind a $4 painting he bought for the frame at a flea market in Adamstown, Pennsylvania. The painting sold for $2.24 million. It was then resold to television producer Norman Lear for $8.14 million. And he sent it on a national tour, a bargain for the whole country.
Everybody dreams of winning the lotto or finding, a hidden Rembrandt or a one-of-a-kind piece or the first one ever made. I think you have a better chance of winning the lottery, but you never know.
It doesn't happen often, but it does happen, and so you just keep looking, because it can happen to you.
Yes!
In this story, a document makes a man rich. But in our next legend, a document keeps a woman out of jail. True or false? A jockey who fell from his horse and died came back to life to win a race the next day. The answer, when we return. Did a dead jockey come back to life to win a race? True. In 1936, Ralph Neves fell from his horse and was pronounced dead, but was revived by a shot of adrenaline and won a title the next day.
Sometimes the long arm of the law doesn't seem to know what the other arm is doing. The result can be an ironic twist that sends a very mixed message.
This titillating tale begins overseas, in France or Amsterdam or maybe Eastern Europe. A young woman has been touring the continent on her own. She's a confident traveler who can usually take care of herself. But now she's a bit lost and has to ask passers-by for directions. Unfortunately, she doesn't know the language, and most of the locals don't speak English. Furthermore, as she seeks help, a stern pair of eyes watches her every move. She anxiously intercepts one pedestrian after another, trying to find someone to help her. Meanwhile, the observing eyes take a growing interest. Soon, our traveler begins to notice someone following her. A strange, dark man moving in ever closer. She picks up her pace with a growing sense of panic. Finally, she intercepts a gentleman and asks if she can walk with him, hoping this will discourage the stalker. Then suddenly, she's grabbed by the arm. Before she can let out a yell, the man reaches into his coat and pulls out a badge. He's a police officer.
God, I'm lost.
The woman is relieved, but only for a moment. The cop wants to see some identification, so she complies. But after checking her ID, the officer decides to write her up. Confused, the woman asks what it's all about.
Sollicitation.
But she doesn't understand the officer's response. Fishing out her travel dictionary, she looks up a word he keeps repeating.
Prostitution.
You think I'm a prostitute? You're arresting me for prostitution?
Prostitution.
I'm not.
She's being cited for soliciting without a permit. She explains it's all a big mistake, but the officer hands her the citation anyway, then abruptly moves off, leaving her with a summons to appear in court.
Oh my gosh.
Soon after, she appears before a magistrate and learns that her fine is the equivalent of $1,000.
Are you serious? $1,000?
She argues her case, insisting that she's innocent of any crime and that she doesn't have $1,000 to pay. The judge calms her down and explains to her that she has another option. The fine is $1,000, But it can be canceled if she simply applies immediately for a prostitute's license, which only costs $25. For an instant, she's stunned, even offended. But it is better than paying $1,000. And by the day's end, she's not only off the hook for the fine, she's got a unique souvenir to show the folks back home. But did such an event ever take place? Or is someone playing fast and loose with the facts? Collectors of urban legends claim this story goes back at least to the 1920s. And it speaks to a popular anxiety about traveling through strange lands with strange laws.
When we go to another country, we have very little awareness of their rules and their customs. We go thinking that the law is the same everywhere. I was very shocked the first time I went to Mexico, and we were driving and we were told that if we didn't carry insurance, we might be thrown in jail because it was against the law to have an accident.
And in fact, Mexico is one of the two countries where the legend is usually set. The other is France, most likely because of stereotypes about French attitudes towards sex and about their penchant for bureaucracy.
In a way, we're looking down at that country. Oh, how bizarre their behavior is. In prostitution, you can even get a license for it.
You're arresting me for prostitution?
The legend rings true because Americans have a morally superior self-image. After all, anytime you see a prostitute on American television, she's usually under arrest. Contrast this with other places in the world, like Amsterdam's red light district, where sexual commerce operates freely. Or countries like Thailand, which are notorious for their underground sex trade, and for authorities who look the other way. But are there any places where you can actually get a license to be a prostitute? There are, and one of them is found in the good old USA. In Pahrump, Nevada, the Chicken Ranch has been a legal brothel for well over a century. And in order to work here, you need a license.
When a new girl comes for her first interview, she's given rules and regulations and a lot of information. At that point, she's told what she would be wearing. She's asked if she's available to be photographed for the website. She's expected to make a schedule and stay by the schedule.
So prostitution is a licensed profession, which suggests the legend is true. But another aspect of the story makes it suspect. The idea that the woman in question is accidentally identified as a prostitute because she's sending the wrong cultural signals. How credible is this idea?
A woman can send the wrong signals when traveling, whether it's for leisure or for business, by appearing as a target. Dress that might be fashionable and appropriate in the United States can give the wrong signal overseas. The same with facial expressions. We smile at people here, we talk to strangers, and that very thing in another country can be quite a come-on. And in countries where the men and women are segregated, such as very conservative Muslim countries, a woman even showing her forearms is also a come-on.
Standards of beauty and behavior vary so radically around the world that what some regard as a sign of status is for others just plain bizarre. But does all this add up to a true legend?
Sollicitation.
No. There is no recorded instance of same-day prostitute registration getting a woman off the hook for soliciting. Regardless of how you feel about it, the tale of the prostitute permission slip isn't worth the paper it's printed on.
Some urban legends are true. Some we just wish were true. Sorting them out is what this show is all about. Hopefully we've helped clarify some of the mysteries surrounding these tales and allowed you to learn which are pure fiction and which are mostly true.